各位观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎收看 J 与 J 论坛。很高兴今天我跟我们 金诺威一起来跟大家聊聊时事。我不晓得大家知不知道 Jim？ 哦 ，Hi Jim，Merry Christmas。Merry
Christmas, Jimmy.
Christmas Eve.
Great to see you. Yes, yes.
I love the holiday. You put me to shame. I should have worn my festive outfits.
Well, red is either for Christmas or for Chinese or for both.
For Chinese Christmas. Red is good. Red is very good. Prosperity. Yeah. I hope you'll have a good time this evening, Christmas Eve with your family, and Christmas Day. It's important to us. It's a big deal. And the lights, the food. I'm glad that we get to be home. Been a very a difficult year for all of us.
For all of us, yes. And remember, the following week, next week, turns into 2021. And maybe we can leave 2020 all behind us.
Please, never again.
That's our New Year's resolution in any way. So
That's right.
This is a very important time of year, every year, and this year especially.
Jim 今天穿的是我们很有这个假期、这个佳节气氛的这个红色的衣服，在圣诞节代表的是喜气。对我们华人对中国人来说，过年也是穿红色。It's okay, Jim. Go ahead. It's okay. We're.
That's all right. It's Wei Li.
No worries.
So, no. I'll call him back.
Yeah. So, like I was saying, 我们今天很高兴啊，圣诞夜、除夕夜，讲错了，圣诞夜在美国是很重要的这个假期，很重要的节日。我们都很期待，尤其今年很这个充满了惊奇的一年。所以 Jim 刚刚说，我们希望能够把这个2020年抛弃，永远不要再重复，我们迎接这个2021这个新的一年。Jim, you know, throughout this past few months, we've had very interesting topics.
Mm-hmm.
But what a lot of our audience don't realize is your background and your expertise and your knowledge on the issues we discuss. There's not a lot of people has your experience. I mean, we can start small by talking about some of your inspirations. Let me tell our audience what we're saying here. 各位观众，我们到年底了，所以我们回顾我们过去几个月，我跟 Jim 讨论了很多时事，跟尤其这个美国大选上的这些话题。但是我们不知道，就是 Jim 他本身的背景，跟他的专业，跟他的经历是非常少有的。他所讲到的这些话题跟题目，他其实都有很深厚的了解。我们今天先可以想，我们年底我们能够回顾一下，但是我们也同样的也要想让大家多认识一下我们 Jim。为什么呢？他的经历是我们很多移民、很多华人都能认同，也都能够感受到的，也是个很好的这个美国梦 （American Dream）。他这个他的，比如说这样好了，我们现在就可以问他说：“哎，是谁启发他？是他会去这个研究，或是去 look up， 会去看，去多听多看。他觉得是谁会让他能够激发他的这个努力啊？其中一位就是李光耀，新加坡的这个以前的总理李光耀李先生。我在新加坡住过，也在那边上过学，所以我对新加坡有深厚的感情，也亲身经历了这个新加坡的这个奇迹。所以我们想问一下 Jim， 为什么他觉得李光耀是他这个一生中觉得很重要的人士 ？Because I was telling our audience that Lee Kuan Yew was one of your inspirations, and that relates to a lot of us as immigrants, as ethnic Chinese. So can you tell us why Lee Kuan Yew? What could you tell us about him?
Well, several different things. I admired him from afar for a very long time while I was growing up, my early business career, because he seemed to have the most important strategic vision of any world leader that I ever encountered. And he was able to generate the respect of people in Singapore, and he did with and for a city-state, which is Singapore, what I like to do with businesses. Start from nothing, turn them around, create value, and in a public sense, a city instead of a business, value is creating better and safer and more productive lives for the citizens. So I was a great fan of his. Then I had the opportunity to go to Singapore, starting back in 1987 or 8, several times. And I was very much impressed with the city. It was probably the most advanced city of its time back then. And it had come from nothing only a generation or two before. And it was not just a success story, but it, like the United States, was a melting pot of people coming from many places. And like Hong Kong, it was a place where people were coming and moving through and creating this churn of communication and ideas and markets and all of those kind of things. And I thought it was absolutely incredible. And from a real estate development perspective, I thought the way that he handled development, markets, land use, etc., was absolutely inspirational. So I became just a tremendous fan of his. And as I study economics, I became a great respecter of the Singapore pension scheme. Far better in managing people's savings for the creation of wealth, and the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is really the vehicle through which Singapore citizens invest their pensions, and they go worldwide. They own a lot of investments in the United States, throughout Europe, I presume throughout Asia. And I just was a tremendous follower of his. And then his son took over after he turned over the reins, and then eventually passed away. And even today, Singapore has grown stronger and stronger in almost every measure. So again, it's not just what you accomplish, but it's the legacy that follows behind you. And he did it all peacefully. Yes, some people accuse him of being a dictator. Maybe that's a little bit the case. Some people say that some people don't have as many civil rights, etc., but nobody's forcing them to stay there. If they want to leave, they're free to leave. And I don't know very many people from Singapore. There are a few that emigrate to the United States. Most people that live in Singapore are very happy there, and they're happy to stay there, which is another mark of the United States. Very few people leave the United States. Few do, but despite all the criticism we give ourselves, most people stay.
That is a very good analogy. Singapore and US are both countries where they attract top talent. Yep. They attract professionals from other countries to immigrate there. Singapore has always been attracting talents and attracting foreign investment and a safe haven for their savings. In the financial market, Singapore is very important. You're absolutely right. The Sentosa Fund, the Singapore Sovereign Fund, is one of the most well-managed and respected and one of the most powerful funds in the world. It does maintain a level of safety and stability for their residents, for Singaporeans. Like I said earlier, I don't remember if, well, maybe we discussed it before we started recording. Having lived in Singapore, going to Anglo-Chinese primary school, ACS, and falling and then seeing this miracle of a city-state was truly amazing. Yes, there is a lot of issues regarding when he was alive, there were a lot of issues. But if you ask Singaporeans, they know, compared to the other countries around them, that how it worked. It worked. And there's a certain level of freedom that most Asian countries do not enjoy. Mm-hmm. There are restrictions, but looking at what it took for Korea, the instability in the government, look at what it took in Taiwan, the destruction of a strong bureaucratic economy. Taiwan is absolutely devastated and ravaged by this political problems. Singapore does not have it. And that is big credit to Mr. Lee Kuan Yew for what he has done. Let me go and tell our audience what you just said. 我们 Jim 对新加坡的这个评价很高。他为什么觉得李光耀的评价很高？因为他见证到过去他从这个一个小城 发展成经济奇迹，发展成这个亚洲举足轻重的一个国家。虽然它是很小的一个岛国，也没有任何的天然资源，但它能够在这个强权之中夹缝中生存。当然，李光耀李先生也有很多对他这个批评的地方，比如说他是很专制，甚至是一个独裁者。但是 James 说，如果你问新加坡人，新加坡的跟美国很像，新加坡人都愿意待在新加坡，也会吸引很多各国的精英移民去新加坡，跟美国一样。为什么？因为那里的这个制度公平公开，加上它这个很重要的就是它的 pension， 就是它的这个国民的这个保障，就你的退休金是由这个国家基金在掌控，所以一直都是很稳，就国家会照顾你。So that is 很重要的一点。You know, Li Huangyao is maybe not the best example. Let's say if we're related to what we went through the past few months in the U.S. In the right electoral college system, two-party system. What would you say would be the president that inspires you the most here in the United States? We're not comparing to Li Huangyao. Yeah.
You mean from Singapore's experience in Lee Kuan Yew? I would.
Yeah, in politics. In
politics, I would say the fundamental importance of the rule of law. Because if you have a rule of law that is blind to whoever participates in the law, and that everyone can depend upon, that the rule of law is not compromised through corruption or favoritism or other things. I think that's a secret of success of Singapore. And
Li Huangyao achieved that. Yes, Li Huangyao achieved that. Like we have here in the U.S.
Yes, if you have that, then everyone can have confidence. If you don't have that, then people don't have confidence. And it's very difficult to make investments of either money or family or life or anything else. And so that's why stability is so very important.
And to have that, you have law and order. And to have that, you have law.
Yeah, justice is blind.
For is equal in front of the law. Everyone is equal. There's no graft. There's no corruption. It's treated seriously. Singapore prosecuted to the fullest, and their bureaucrats, their government officials, are paid a very competitive income, where they can keep and retain their talent because they can compete with other countries.
Right, and they're respected. Government employees are respected. That tends to be the case throughout most of Asia, maybe not everywhere, but certainly the democratic and free market parts of Asia, like in Taiwan, like in Korea, etc. I can't speak for the communist countries, but
that's a misconception. Compared to, let's say, North Korea, we can compare. But some of the more so-called communist countries, the former Soviet bloc, like Vietnam or China, they have embraced basically world market economy. They have embraced it. So their ideology may be still communism, but in reality, because their economy opened up, because they are able to interact with everyone from all over the world, and because of technology and the internet, they open up, and their bureaucracy, their government is actually, how should I say this? A lot more westernized than we realize. For example, China, to give credit where it's due, right? Their municipal government, their local government, including their biggest cities like Beijing and Shanghai, they're very advanced when it comes to giving their residents the convenience. I think it's important, right, for government to give people convenience and to have a fair rule of law, as you said. China has achieved that. They really have. The past few years, there's a lot of changes. Persecuted for graft, for corruption, unlike before, where people have. That's why the economy is booming, right? Just like Vietnam is booming, because they caught up. They understood what Singapore went through, and they're learning from it instead of going backwards. So, which is a good way. It's a different way of seeing the U.S. ideology finally being able to do some good. Because, like I said, China's government, China's how do I say this? Their rule of law is strengthened in the last it's always been strong, obviously, but for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that?
Yeah.
Well, I actually brought up earlier one of your biggest inspirations here in the U.S. is because I know you mentioned President Gerald Ford before, that he is somebody that you would compare the most to, that inspires you the most here in the States. Could you tell us why Gerald Ford? Why? Because that's surprising to me.
Well, several reasons. I came of age, I guess, as an adult during Gerald Ford's short time as president. And I think in hindsight, most Americans do not fully appreciate the number of challenges that Gerald Ford faced and how he handled them so successfully, and how he took a very, very difficult, controversial time. The late 60s and early 70s in the United States were very difficult for everyone. The whole society was being ripped apart. It was the legacy of the Vietnam War. It was the trauma of Watergate and President Nixon's own corruption. It was a very poorly managed economy that had introduced inflation, and it was tearing people apart.
Oil embargo, that also caused inflation.
The Saudis and the Middle Eastern people tried to take advantage of America's weakness during that time. The oil embargo exacerbated many of the other problems, etc., and created enormous foreign policy issues. All of those things. Gerald Ford never aspired to be president. He was not elected. He was appointed by President Nixon as vice president, after the forced resignation for corruption of President Nixon's vice president, Spiro Agnew, in 1973. Ford was appointed in 1973, and by August of 1974, President Nixon was out. So in August of 1974, Gerald Ford was inaugurated, and he made the very courageous decision, terribly unpopular at the time, to pardon President Nixon, and pardon in advance for any crimes that might have occurred, or that Nixon could have been prosecuted and convicted on. That was unheard of, but he did it. He took amazing political and legal risks, but he did it. And many years later, after he unfortunately lost to Jimmy Carter, in part because of that decision to pardon, he wrote a book. His memoirs were called, the title of it was A Time to Heal. And what he did was heal the United States. When you really go back and look at the history of 1970 to 1974 in the United States, we started off having tremendous tumultuous times because of inflation in the economy, the oil embargo, the whole Watergate scenario, the Vietnam War dominated everything. And in April of 75, only 7 months after Ford had ascended to the presidency, Saigon fell. That created a whole new set of issues, not just for the United States, but for worldwide, of all the things, including the boat people, our immigration status, all the other things that followed from that. And it tore apart. But by the time he left office in January of 77, after having lost the election in November of 76, the United States was getting back to calm normalcy. And the stock market bottomed out in January of 1976 and went on the longest run that it ever had up until 1981 or 1982, something like 6 or 7 years of almost totally uninterrupted stock market and economic prosperity. It was incredible. He had the ability to turn things around, but then unfortunately his experience was at the bottom. But in hindsight, people give him a lot of credit for taking a very bad set of circumstances and fixing them together. And I don't think history fully appreciates all the things that he does. At least they don't appreciate him nearly as much as I do. So,
well, probably not a fair shake. Regrettably, most Americans do not know. I did not know President Ford's contributions. I knew that he didn't win his re-election because of the fact that he pardoned Nixon. And there's a lot of parallels that compares to today. And that's why I brought this up, because it makes a lot of sense. By him pardoning Nixon, and at that time, it was not a popular decision. But when you look back to it, it created stability, and it would allow the nation to move forward. So perhaps President Biden would look at the example and maybe pardon Mr. Trump, so to allow us to move forward. But it would be a very unpopular move for President Biden. That I can tell you that. We agree on that. And you know what? You're right. The economy was, when I study my in finance and my graduate degrees, we always look back at the 70s and look at the interest rates. CDs were giving you double-digit rates. You were getting 20, 25, 30% rates because the inflation was super high. It was so good.
Prime went to 22%, and most loans were structured as a variable rate. Everything collapsed.
How do you live during that time? You were in your college years, perhaps?
Well, I graduated college in 74.
So you were right in the middle of it. So you experienced this uncertainty.
I graduated business in June of 76, May of 76. So his time was
right there.
Was exactly when I was in business school and immediately after. And I moved to Washington, D.C. And lived there during his final 6 months. So I watched it up closely. Yeah.
Probably at that time, it was the most shocking and most uncertainty in Washington, D.C. inside the belt. That is so much political drama, so much at stake.
Oh, incredibly so. It was a wonderful time to be there. You always learn more during difficult times.
Yeah, but growing up is not easy.
Anybody can deal with good times.
Yeah.
It takes strength to get through the tough times.
It hardens you. It gives you more resolve seeing what happened. And also that fear, I guess I shouldn't use the word fear because you saw what was going on, because you experienced it, you knew that you had to put an extra effort. You knew that there are going to be hard times and you're prepared for it. Makes a lot of sense compared to now, doesn't it, Jim?
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels. And frankly, I see a lot of parallel between Joe Biden and Jimmy Carter, too.
Jimmy Carter is beloved and even now. However, a lot of his policies or his legacy, what he left behind, is up to debate.
Yeah.
We shall see about President Biden. We already know what he's facing. It's not going to be easy road. Go ahead.
There's one great big parallel that I don't think most people realize. Jimmy Carter didn't like the energy industry at all either, much like Biden, and a lot of Democrats don't like the energy industry. And Jimmy Carter was president really when Congress passed the beginning of a lot of alternative energy experiments, new technologies, things like that. Things like windmills and solar were at their very infancy back then. And the government spent a great deal of time and a great deal of money trying to move the energy-based economy. But it was done for opposite reasons. It was done then because we felt that we had an energy crisis. We were running out of oil worldwide. That's why the prices were so high. Okay, now we have a surplus of petroleum products, et cetera. So, and that was the beginning of the alternative energy. Now we're well up, and the alternative energy sources are taking on their own. Look what electronic cars are doing today, as an example. So There's some parallels. There's some opposites too. But I find history repeats itself.
It does. It's amazing you brought up, for example, Tesla or renewable energy, green energy. It's amazing because that's, being in the market, that's all we're talking about. These tech stocks, or we shouldn't even call it tech anymore. These innovation, market leaders, they're the ones that are driving this force, driving this bull market. And yes, you're right. A lot of parallels. We're restarting after the last 4 years, basically, with this sector. And there is, China's way ahead of us in the game with their batteries, with their electronic cars. But still, we have Tesla, we have Elon Musk trying to get there. And isn't it amazing that there's so much going on that is repeating itself? I always say that history repeats itself. I love it. I love the fact that we're on the same wavelength. That President Ford, even Lee Kuan Yew. I look at Lee Kuan Yew and I see what's going on in Vietnam or Taiwan, or even some countries like Indonesia or Malaysia that's trying to get there. I would criticize Lee Kuan Yew and say, hey, it's easier to control a smaller country, or it's easier to do this and do that. It's never easy. Just like for Mr. Ford, for President Ford, it was not easy. It's not easy for any of the presidents to deal with it, because your legacy, whether it work or not, is not decided then. You want to do the right thing. I always live by that. You want to do the right thing, even though it's unpopular at the moment. Time will always give, proof, what was right was right. And but it's not easy, right? Being in politics to get reelected, and he actually did lose the election. He did the right thing, but lost the election.
No, and really, I think one of the challenges of leadership is doing the right thing, but then persuading other people that it is the right
consensus.
thing.
Yeah, getting it through is very hard to be
very hard. And if you do it all alone and you don't mind, many people don't mind being alone, and that's fine. But then you'll never be a leader. You'll be able to satisfy yourself. And in the United States, we value individualism, so that's fine. But to be a leader and to really sustain change, you have to make sure that people follow you. And it doesn't mean caving into the will of the masses. It means persuading the masses to come along and demonstrate that your ideas are the best.
Put deals together, right? Put deals together to get through what you want to be done, to have consensus, to work with others. This is also, this is what a democracy is about, You have to be able to.
And I think that comes back to Gerald Ford. What he was very good about was building consensus. Everyone trusted him. And on Saturday Night Live, they were merciful in teasing him all the time, because he made the mistake one day he loved to play golf, and he played golf one day and he hit a ball. It hit somebody in the head. And then he was coming down from Air Force One and he tripped on the stairs and fell down the stairs. And Chevy Chase on Saturday Night Live made his whole career imitating Gerald Ford. And here Gerald Ford, he was an All-American football player at the University of Michigan when Michigan was, as an undergrad, when Michigan was national champion.
Powerhouse, national champion.
He goes to Yale Law School, the most challenging law school in the country. He becomes a lawyer. Then he becomes a lifelong congressman. And LBJ used to tease him about being stupid. The expression, you got to walk and chew gum at the same time, LBJ used to use that to ridicule Gerald Ford. He would say, he played one too many football games without a helmet. And he said he can't walk and chew gum at the same time. But in reality, he's one of the very brightest people ever. But he was a little clumsy sometimes.
But what you meant was, what you also are pointing out is how media or entertainment or public image could shift like that, where the narrative is not true. Saturday Night Live is my favorite show. I've watched it since I was a child. I never stopped. There's some years it was lean, but this past few years, because of President Trump, it gave Saturday Night Live so much good material. Have you been watching it?
Oh yeah. Alec Baldwin
As
playing
Mr. Trump,
is really good. Of course, Baldwin just loves to dig at him, and then the last few times they've got Jim Carrey
as
playing
Mr. Biden,
Biden. Yeah. So and they used to have Dana Carvey play
Mr. Bush.
Bush.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was great.
They really do a good job at political satire. So.
It's on point. It's sharp, but it is on point, and I always laugh, and it never fails. Saturday Night Live is an institution. You know what? Let's end on that perfect note. Saturday Night Live that brings up happy memories, good feelings. It also showcases what American politics and democracy means. Being able to point out and make fun of someone in power, and President Trump would say that Saturday Night Live criticized them, say it's unfair, but they make fun of everyone equally, and that's what's great about it.
One of the things that President Bush, H.W. Bush, felt the best about was when he invited Dana Carvey to come to the White House and put on a show making fun of him when he was president.
President Bush Sr. was one of the best. He, being a native Estonian, he had a sense of humor. He understood. He didn't mind compared to certain presidents that we know now that gets very angry, very, very thin-skinned. But like I said, it's a great note. I hope you enjoy Christmas Eve and Christmas. I hope all your family's around, and I hope that we have a great New Year. We will speak again before New Year's next week, New Year's Eve.
Very fortunate. Okay, Jimmy, see you again next week.
Thank you, and enjoy happy holidays.
Okay, thanks very much to everyone around the world.
圣诞快乐，
拜拜。
谢谢收看。